Over the past few years, I've grown to appreciate summer a lot more than I used to when I was a kid, but autumn is still my baby girl and she always will be. There's something about autumn as a season, as a setting, as a vibe that makes reading even more of a romantic hobby than it usually is. There isn't a more beautiful and serene and soothing image than of someone sat on a park bench reading a novel while the leaves fall around them. But the book they're reading on that park bench has got to have the right vibes. And admittedly, autumn vibes are difficult to pin down. For example, you can easily say that a horror novel has autumn vibes because, well, Halloween. Nights drawing in, air getting colder, Halloween is in this season, so horror makes sense. But so does something cozy, so does something romantic. So here I have a stack of 5 books that I think have autumn vibes. I have done a video like this in the past several years ago. I've avoided repeating any of those books, and there are still lots of books that didn't make the cut for this 5-book video, so it's very likely I'm gonna do another one of these very soon, like within this autumn, so stay tuned for that. Also, I asked my patrons to vote on this video, whether or not they prefer a video about books with autumn vibes or a video about books for spooky season, and they said, hey, why not both? So I'm really glad I put that as an option, which means you're getting both. And if you'd like to vote on what kinds of videos I make in the future, you can also join my Patreon, because voting on future videos is just one of many, many perks and bonuses that I give to my patrons for showing their love and support for everything I do on this channel. Here are 5 books with autumn vibes. Let's start off with one of my top 5 favorite books of all time. If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. I love this book more than I can say, while also fully being aware of the criticism that this book often gets. So I'm going to mention that because it sometimes feels like an elephant in the room when talking about If We Were Villains. This novel very obviously owes its very existence to Donna Tartt's The Secret History, the first kind of official work of dark academia. Without that book, this one wouldn't exist, and most people prefer The Secret History. I don't. I prefer this. And that's for 2 reasons. This book is a more overt and straightforward murder mystery story, and I love campy murder mysteries. I am a massive Agatha Christie fan. One of her books almost appeared on this list. And so I like the fact that this book leans into camp murder mysteries a little bit more. And the other reason is I was a theatre student myself for many, many years, as most of the characters in this book are. I know a lot about Shakespeare. I studied Shakespeare. I have performed in Shakespeare plays. Shakespeare's words, as corny as this sounds, flow through my veins, and they also flow through this book. And so I feel an intense kinship to it, and if any book has autumn vibes as far as I'm concerned, it's this book. Also, The Secret History was in the last video that I did on autumn vibes like 3 years ago, so don't be mad. In case you haven't read it, If We Were Villains opens with a man called Oliver who has just been released from prison after serving 10 years for a murder he probably didn't commit. 10 years ago, Oliver was a theatre student at university, specifically studying Shakespeare, and at some point while he was at university, one of his closest friends tragically died, and Oliver took the fall for that death. And so we wind the clocks back 10 years to find out what actually happened on the night of that death and how Oliver was actually involved in the whole thing. The detective who put Oliver away greets him at the prison gates and says, "All right, you've served 10 years for this. I want to know the truth," which immediately paints the detective in questionable light. But anyway, the story that follows is an absolute doozy. Much like The Secret History, this is a book full of very unlikable people, a cast of nasty, backstabbing, arrogant, pompous, Shakespearean people. They study Shakespeare, they put on plays, they talk about Shakespeare when they're not studying or putting on plays, and we know that at some point, one of them is going to die, and the book moves from a gothic, dark academia, toxic drama to a gothic murder mystery, both of which are perfect for autumn. So this book and the autumn season are very much a match made in heaven. ML Rio has a new book coming out imminently, and I'm going to be reading that the day it comes out, but I might also reread this at some point in the next 3 months because it's autumn. What else am I supposed to do but read this book? Another gothic book that is absolutely perfect for autumn is Anatomy, a Love Story by Dana Schwartz, and I'll throw in the sequel, Immortality, for free. Did that look cool? Anatomy and Immortality are a pair of YA gothic romance novels that are also historical fiction. The first is set in Edinburgh, the second in London. And these books follow a young protagonist called Hazel Sinnott. Hazel is the daughter of a wealthy family in Edinburgh, but her father died at war, her brother died of a plague, her mother is forever steeped in grief, and all young Hazel wants to do is become a doctor. Anatomy is very obviously inspired by Frankenstein, in that Hazel is someone who has very much been touched by death and wishes to conquer it. Frankenstein was an arrogant young man who thought that he could cheat death. While Hazel is a little bit more grounded, she just wants to be a doctor and treat people and help people. But she's a woman in 19th century Scotland, and that means she's not allowed to be a doctor. She sneaks into the medical exam dressed in her brother's clothes. She is discovered, cast out, but a professor takes a liking to her. This professor is a legend of the medical world, and he challenges her to pass the exam without being allowed to take any classes. And in order to do that, she needs bodies. And this is where the love story comes into play, because she then meets a resurrection man, which is a very romantic name for a grave robber. Someone who steals not jewels or any other valuables from graves, but the bodies themselves, to then sell them on, often to people for medical research, and that's exactly what Hazel wants to do. She says to Jack, hey, dig me up some bodies so that I can practice on them and learn the ropes, understand anatomy, and then I can pass the exam. As the story goes on, they start to fall in love, obviously, but they also uncover a massive conspiracy. These books are so much fun. They are gothic, they are romantic, they are historical. The first one is set in Edinburgh, and there is no city in the world that does autumn better than Edinburgh. And so therefore, autumn vibes. So I wanted to avoid including a horror novel because that felt too obvious. I really wanted to include a fantasy book somehow, and I also realized that every time I do a video of 5 books for some theme or other, I seem to always include T. Kingfisher. It's just unavoidable at this point. So here's Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher. Over the past few years, T. Kingfisher has made a name for herself writing very good horror novels, as well as dark, fairy tale inspired fantasy stories, and that's exactly what Nettle and Bone is. This is a short fantasy novel, but it also feels like a crazy fairy tale. It is dark, it is gothic, it is very autumnal, but it's also a fun adventure story. Nettle and Bone follows a princess. She is the youngest of 3 princesses, and her kingdom is awkwardly trapped between 2 much larger, much more dangerous foreign nations. And when the novel begins, our protagonist, Mara, has been seeing her sisters get married off to the prince of one of these more powerful countries in order to build a political allyship against the other one. It is a marriage of survival for the nation, but when her eldest sister dies at the hands of that prince, and he demands to then marry the second princess, Mara knows this prince is evil, and she sets out on an adventure to kill him. But Mara is going to need some help. First, she tracks down a grave witch, and the grave witch tells Mara to complete a series of tasks. One of the tasks she must complete is to resurrect the bones of a dog. Another is to make a cloak out of nettles, hence Nettle and Bone, and there's a lot more besides as she builds up a cast of characters, a party to travel with her and fulfill her quest. Nettle and Bone is wonderful fun. I really enjoy this book. Much like a traditional fairy tale, it is dark as well as fun. T. Kingfisher clearly knows how to write a fairy tale, how to make it dark, but also full of whimsy and adventure, and most of all, strangeness. This really is a great book to read in the autumn if you want something fantastical, fairy tale inspired, but also still pretty dark and a little spooky, because we must remember, you can't have autumn without spooky season. In that way, this thing's perfect. Another one of my absolute favorite books of all time is The Last House on Needless Street by Katrina Ward. Now, I've been lucky enough to meet Kat at an event, and she is one of the most charming people I've ever met in my life. She has an incredible imagination. She is brilliantly quirky. She's an American writer who now, I believe, lives in Devon, England, and she is absolutely one of a kind. And even though I've read several of her books, this one, her most popular book, still remains my favorite. It is her most popular for a reason. And I'm pretty sure when I made that video a few years ago about books with autumn vibes, I read this book right around that same time, but it wasn't in that video. Maybe I read it just after. The Last House on Needless Street is set primarily in a house, and the house is occupied by a reclusive resident who was, several years ago, I think a decade ago, a prime suspect in the case of a disappeared child. There's a lake nearby, and at the lakeside, children have gone missing. This reclusive guy, Ted, was a suspect, but he was eventually cleared and he went on with his life. But he never leaves his house. The windows are boarded up. He lives with his cat, but he also has a daughter. Every so often, his daughter's mother drops her off for a weekend with Ted, and we get the novel from Ted's perspective, his daughter's perspective, and even the cat's perspective. This book is interesting in that it sort of sits on a knife edge, or maybe two knife edges, between horror, thriller, and murder mystery. I've talked in the past about how the line between murder mystery and thriller is kind of blurred, but the main difference is that a murder mystery usually follows a detective, a sleuth of some kind. There usually isn't a lot of danger in a murder mystery. The crime has happened and the whole thing is a puzzle. Whereas with a thriller, we're often following a victim who is trying to escape something while also trying to figure out what's going on. And so a thriller sits neatly between a murder mystery and a horror novel. This book somehow manages to feel like all three. And I think that's absolutely incredible. I can't really tell you much more about it than that, but maybe it's because I read it during the autumn, but I picture everything that happens in this book taking place during the autumn, when the nights are getting shorter, the trees are dying or dead, there are leaves all on the ground surrounding this house. It's a story of isolation and darkness and mystery. It is perfect for the autumn season. And finally, we have Now She Is Witch by Kirsty Logan, one of the best British authors writing today. Typically, any book that is about witches or witchcraft feels pretty autumnal, partly because historically witches have been connected to Halloween, and also because through our modern lens, witches are often seen as quite cozy these days. You find witches in video games and TV shows and books that are more cozy than scary, and I'm here for it. It's wonderful. Now She Is Witch tells the story of a young girl called Lux. She and her mother live in an isolated cabin in the woods. They are cunning women who live at the edges of society, and they are seen by society at large as both helpful and suspicious/dangerous. When the novel opens, Lux is returning home to her mother after having been away at some sort of religious sanctuary. We don't know much about it at the beginning, but she comes home to tragedy. Her home has been destroyed, her mother has been killed, she has nothing left. The suspicion, rallied against cunning women like them, finally boiled over while she was away, and now her mother is dead. But Lux is given not a single moment to breathe when another woman comes along, a woman called Else, or maybe it's pronounced Elsa. And this woman turns to Lux and says, "Hey, far away there is an evil lord. He did something terrible to me and I want revenge. I am on my way to kill him. Would you like to join me?" We can go and take revenge on the patriarchy together. And so they do. They set off on a kind of adventure where they will meet people and come across hardship and difficulty, and on the way they will take revenge against patriarchy by killing an evil lord. What makes this book so great is how it feels very predictable, and yet it constantly takes you by surprise, and it is simply the best of what this kind of thing could be. It's easy to imagine a story about witches getting revenge, a story about religious persecution, about patriarchy, a book about two women heading out on an adventure. It's easy to think something like this up, but only Kirsty Logan could have written it as such a fantastic and satisfying adventure. This book is dark but also exciting, and it has perfect autumn vibes. And just to finish off, in case you're wondering what I'm going to be reading this autumn, I'm going to start off with The Honey Witch. At the time of recording, I haven't started this book, but I am just about to. This is the book I have chosen to get me in the mood for the autumn season. According to its blurb, according to people who've read it, this is a cozy, sapphic, historical romantasy book about a witch. Cozy cottagecore vibes, a sapphic love story about forbidden magic and witches being lovely. I mean, I don't know much about it, I haven't read it yet, but this is what I'm reading to kick off my autumn reading season. If you enjoyed this list of books with immaculate autumn vibes, once again, you can support me on Patreon. I would really, really appreciate your support. Thank you in advance, and subscribe for books.